our industry is really being disrupted at the moment for many different reasons that have nothing to do with AI. And AI is one of the few tools who will maybe save us. All the improvement today in the production workflows, 90% of that will be coming from AI, in my opinion.
How you've seen technology revolutionize the industry?
We need to be faster and faster at doing things. Honestly, without those tools, it's simply impossible.
Are there ways we can help these people open their minds to try new approaches?
I had people from the pay TV side coming to me and say, you're going to kill our subscription business. You could turn your old school business into that. Just the way Netflix used to be a company renting DVD through the regular post office. It's no time to play it safe, in my opinion.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Simple Tech Talk, where we dive into the world of AI and its impact across various businesses and industries. I'm your host, Serge Brouwer, and today our special business leader guest is Sébastien Audoux, a renowned expert in sports media, digital transformation, and content strategy. With over 2 decades of experience in the sports and media industry, Sébastien has worn many hats, from sports announcer covering major golf and basketball events across the world, to media strategist, to now serving as a consultant for tech companies navigating the sports sector. His impressive career includes heading digital content for Canal+, where he launched numerous groundbreaking digital initiatives, including YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch channels, and spearheading live sports innovation on the myCANAL app. Currently, Sébastien serves in multiple advisory roles, including the Psyched4, the Cypher Sport, and Respo Vision, helping drive innovation and business development in the sports ecosystem. He's also a thought leader in AI solutions and digital strategy, offering his expertise to leagues, federations, and startups globally. Sébastien, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here with you.
Could you start us off by sharing perhaps a bit more about your journey through the sports and media landscape and how you've seen technology revolutionize the industry?
Well, I've been there long enough to have witnessed a lot of, movement within the industry. When I started, we had big cameras. It was really hard to do a lot of stuff on site. For example, we had to send a lot of footage back to Paris. We had big, editing room where you had multiple tapes, player and recorder, and basically you had to figure out your entire feature story before going to the edit room, because once you start editing, you couldn't go back, or that was very hard to do. I mean, if you wanted to change one shot, you had to figure out one thing that would be the perfect fit, like the 3 second that you wanted to change. So that was really, really heavy on everything, and basically the creative element was oftentimes, behind the needs that the tech part would have. And I was particularly frustrated, for example, when I started going on site for the golf majors, because I had one satellite slot every day at usually around 12 or 1 o'clock. And I was sending the entire footage that I had back to Paris. And obviously, let's say I had an opportunity to do an interview with Tiger Woods at like 2 o'clock. Too bad, I had to wait 24 hours to send that back to Paris because I had only one satellite slot. And obviously, after a few years, I thought, it doesn't work for me. So we started looking, for example, to ways of sending footage back through the internet. Obviously, today in 2024, it sounds crazy to think, those guys were really looking at that. But at that time, that was really groundbreaking. And the first time I did that was actually at the Masters. I think it was in 2009, probably, something like that. It was, for them, that was, when I requested like a broadband connection to send video back to Paris, they were like, come on, you're really going to do that? And so basically, they had installed a fiber optic, and it was in the middle of the office in the TV compound. So basically, I had to stand with my computer and plug it to the only fiber optic in the entire compound to send the footage back to Paris. And obviously with that, I was also allowed to edit the footage, because obviously I knew perfectly what I had shot and the interviews I had done. So we started, doing more and more on site, to the point where now you can pretty much, And that's exactly how I like to talk about remote production. For example, remote production for me is not moving all the tech from on-site to back at your HQ, wherever it might be. I mean, it's part of it is that, but to me, it's actually more powerful than that. It's the ability to produce anything from anywhere. And let's go back 20 years ago. It would have been very hard for us to record a podcast like this or any, audio recording with that ease, remotely. Obviously, a big evolution. And what I'm mentioning was just the start. And obviously, it became more and more IT and less, analogic video driven. And I think I was fortunate to have witnessed that because when I talk to newcomers within the industry, I mean, they have no clue how hard it was back then to do anything because we had so constraints from the tech side.
And I was curious as well with these revolutions almost in the approach to business in the sports industry and the sports media industry. I was wondering, how does that weigh up to this entire change that we're seeing now with AI as well? Is that going to be as revolutionary, and where does it compare and contrast with the big changes you've seen in the past?
Well, I mean, to me, it's at least as important as the transition that we've been through, basically working on many different hardware machines to now suddenly being able to do anything from a laptop, including, I mean, you could produce a live, you could produce the Super Bowl on multiple laptops. I mean, we have companies doing that, for example, or offering the ability to do that. Obviously, they won't be doing the Super Bowl like that anytime soon, but, theoretically, you could do that. And AI is exactly the type of tool that will enable a whole new range of possibilities within the sports content space. Obviously, I witnessed that. Well, first of all, when we started implementing workflows to be able to suddenly, publish videos on multiple platforms at the same time, because at first that was a big issue in digital. You had to basically, you had a video that usually you were producing with the broadcast tools, and then you had to upload it on Facebook, and then do the same thing on Twitter, and then do the same thing on YouTube, and then do the same thing on your own platform. We're talking hours of work, basically redoing the same task all over again. So obviously then we saw, companies arriving within that space, Walmoca, for example, a French company. And so we started working with them, and then suddenly we could upload, the same video at the same times in 10 different targets. So that was so much easier. Plus, obviously, all the video feeds from our channels and our games were suddenly in the cloud. You could edit those clips, do the thumbnail, do everything within that solution. So that was already a huge improvement in terms of workflow. But I still had many issues. I mean, should we do like a 10-minute highlight for that game, or should we do 5 minutes? Or, I mean, what the people are going to want to see for that game? I mean, and do we do the same length for YouTube and Facebook, or do we do different lengths and all of that? And obviously different algorithm, different fan base and different user base and all of that. So that was really complex. And then came AI. And suddenly we could produce, highlights, multiple highlights for multiple targets right after the end of the game, which is also a big advantage because, let's say, I mean, that was obviously, in particular, when you are competing with other rights owners throughout the world, because that's sometimes the case. Or the main, the main rights owner, the leagues themselves, that was the case with Formula One, for example, where you want to, that F1 is going to publish its own highlights. And if you don't publish your own before they do, then you're pretty much lost because they're going to get all the fans, even in France. So that was a huge issue. But if you start, even if you edit during the race, you still have, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes to finalize the editing and then publish that. With AI, it can be, the highlights can be ready right at the end of the race or right at the end of the game. So that's a game changer. Plus, you don't have to choose is it worth 10 minutes, 5 minutes, wherever? Do we publish the same length on YouTube and Facebook and whatever other targets? Then you can suddenly, do like a 5, 10, 2 minutes highlights and then publish that in all the different targets. And so obviously that was the first, element of AI, but now it goes much further than that. You can publish on, you can pretty much automatize all the highlights, different lengths, individual clips, multiple clips, summaries, all of that with different thumbnails that can be automated as well. So you can do all of that without even thinking about it. I mean, it's a lot of setup at the beginning, but then you can let the machine do all the hard work. And more importantly, in my opinion, is that we often see that just as a cost-cutting thing. And it's really wrong. I mean, that's the wrong way of approaching that. To me, it's not that. It's basically enabling the human beings to focus on what they do best. The creativity part, the narrative part, being able to tell the story properly with the authenticity that you need when telling proper stories in sports. And obviously the machine, I mean, maybe, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years, they will be able to do that as well as human beings, but so far it's really not the case. But the issue is that when we were doing that the old-fashioned way, human beings, very creative, very bright human beings, were spending 90% of their time doing stuff that are very basic, like publishing the same video all over again to different targets, doing the thumbnails 10 different times because you don't need the same thumbnails on Facebook and on your own OTT platform and on YouTube and all of that, doing the titles and all of that. So suddenly when you can do all of that pretty much automatically, that leaves way more time for those bright people to do, creative stuff that are much more important. So it gives a lot of freedom to teams that it's more than just, I needed like 10 humans to do that. Now I'm only going to need 5. I mean, I think people that think that way are not really looking at the true potential of AI. AI costs a lot of money as well. So it's not like you're going to have suddenly a positive ROI just because you're implementing AI. It's much, much complex than that.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point because often enough when we discuss AI implementation in various industries, this contrasting thought often goes on whether AI can be used as a tool to empower the creative minds of those working already in the industry, or if it's a worry by the people working in the industry. And it sounds like a lot of the repetitive, tedious tasks in the sports media industry can be taken care of through artificial intelligence solutions, and that it opens the gateway with a lot more time and opportunities for these creatives to put their full creative minds and their efforts to producing top-notch quality content. Now, do you think within the sports media landscape that AI should be seen also as a threat or more towards an opportunity for those working in the industry?
Honestly, I don't see any threat in our industry. Our industry is really being disrupted at the moment for many different reasons that have nothing to do with AI. And actually, AI is one of the few tools that we have at our disposal to maybe save us, because, I mean, media rights is getting very complicated because it's pretty much maxed out everywhere. I mean, US might have some room to grow as we've seen in Europe and even more in France. It's getting tougher and tougher. Content keep costing more and more money for various reasons, whether you're acquiring or producing it. And so it's a difficult business. And obviously AI comes at a time where we need more efficiency. We need to let the creative people be really creative. But at the same time, we are also really overwhelmed with the amount of content that we have to deal with. Coming back to my previous point about the different highlights that we need to produce. And for example, when I started my career, it was all about choosing which games we were going to air. That was pretty much one game per week. And, I remember when I started my career, we were not even airing the first 2 rounds of the PGA Tour tournaments. And now that would be, crazy to do that. You're telling me you acquired the rights for that, but you're choosing not to to offer it to your consumers? But that was the case, 25 years ago. These days, it's different. If we acquire 300 football games, we want those 300 football games on the platform with highlights, with the proper marketing, with the proper, clipping and, social media presence for all of that. And that's just overwhelming. to be dealing with this huge amount of content. And without the help of AI, you simply cannot do that. I mean, you could say, yeah, we would need to hire, like, I don't know, another 200 people to do that. It's unrealistic. And then you would have other problem because, I mean, how do you manage 200 people? It has its own set of issues and complexities to deal with. So again, AI can help you stay agile while doing more stuff. And that's so important in this day and age. And also, because as I've said, we need to be faster and faster at doing things as well. And honestly, without those tools, it's simply impossible to do all of that quicker than we've already been doing. So I would say all the improvement today in the production workflows 90% of that will be coming from AI, in my opinion. Probably even more than that. It's a conservative take to actually say 90%. It could be actually 99%. We are getting to a point where we were as efficient as possible without AI. We've been learning to, again, the workflows I mentioned in the opening segment of the podcast. We've been using that for almost 10 years already. So we are expert at, using those type of new workflows, cloud-based workflows and all of that. But now where else can you go? Well, with the help of AI, doing more stuff, doing it more efficiently, doing it faster, which is also very, very important.
No, it's
to answer your question, I'm not afraid at all. I think it's an opportunity and a huge opportunity for the sports media space because we're dealing with a lot of disruption and a lot of complexities that can only be solved through AI, in my opinion.
No, it's an interesting take, and it's fascinating to realize that in a span of just over 2 decades, that the technology and the approach to the sports media industry has revolutionized so abruptly and so massively in that sense. Now, coming back to our earlier discussions that we had one-on-one before the podcast recording, there was an interesting discussion we had as well with the change across generations and the type of content that newer generations also like to consume. Now, one of the things that is perhaps a myth around there that younger generations do not wish to pay for such type of media and that they might not be as interested in sports media content, etc. But I'm curious, what's your take on that? Is that a myth, or is that a fact?
It's a complete myth. It's completely wrong. I couldn't, be more against that take. And I think, to give you a good example, I've been in love with video gaming pretty much my whole life, and I've been a huge gamer. I started with the 8-bit console, the Sega Master System, and then we went through basically all the machines you can think of. And at that time, we were basically, going to the store, buying very expensive games, in cartridge. So it was very expensive to produce, and then we were playing those games, and that we were spending quite a lot of money on that. I've got 2 teenagers at home. I think they never went to a store to buy a game. Never, ever. And I wonder if they will be doing it, at some point in their life. I mean, we still have physical games, but I don't know for how much longer. But they're playing a lot of games that are for free. And you could say, yeah, that's the main difference. Those younger demographic, they don't want to pay for anything. Well, that's not true. They're spending an awful lot of money in the in-app purchase. And in the end, they're spending way more money than the money that I was spending, 30 years ago when I was going to a store buying a game. It's just a different business with a different business model, with a different way to engage with the product. And the thing is that in my opinion, the sports content industry, at least the pay TV industry, hasn't catch up with that change. And we are still feeling, it's all about subscription, 12-month engagement or 24-month engagement, and that's it. Like the way it was like 30 years ago, you had to bring people to install a satellite antenna, and then you were a very captive consumer because it's very hard to move the satellite antenna or to remove it, or and so that was a very, I would not say an easy business, but easier than it is today, where the competition is coming from everywhere. And then I guess the easy way out for all the troubles that we've been going through that I mentioned before is, yeah, it's those young people, they want to go towards illegal streams and all of that. They don't want to pay for anything. I can tell you, when I was a teenager, I went the illegal route on video gaming, music and all of that, not up until I was old enough to have more money, up until we had offerings or, new business model coming to solve those issues. In the case of music, I always say it's not the different lawsuits against Napster and all of that that killed illegal streaming. What killed illegal streaming was Apple Music and Spotify and all of that. That pretty much killed the illegal streaming music industry because we suddenly had a new business model that was, adapted to the way we wanted to engage with music. Same thing with gaming. It's changed completely. Now you can subscribe to a Game Pass and have access to many games through subscription. Completely new. Didn't exist obviously 30 years ago. But in terms of sports media, it's still very much about advertising on the free-to-air and subscription only on the other end. What about microtransaction, aggregation of different offering where suddenly you can pick and choose? I was actually telling that story yesterday at a conference I was about, the fact that 25 years ago, I could access a cable subscription in Paris where you would acquire stars that was essentially virtual money, and then you could spend the stars on each channel. Obviously, the more premium channel were worth more stars, and the less premium, less stars. And then you could switch from month to month. And obviously, I don't know, I was buying certain channels according to the sports season, and then I would stop buying those channels, and I was buying, maybe more original content channels when it was the off season. And actually, that model would be great today. That was a good model 25 years ago. That would be a perfect model today, according to the way we engage with subscription or with content and all of that. So I just think that it's a very lazy attitude to just say, yeah, those younger demographic, they don't want to pay for anything. It's just wrong.
No, fair point. It's an interesting approach that we really have to get creative with, switching around our business models and approaching it from a different perspective to get a younger demographic more engaged. Now, also, one of your recent posts on LinkedIn discussed youth engagement, also with broadcasting on the sports media side for the younger generations, also for talent scouting and all this kind of stuff as well. Could you perhaps dive a bit more into that as well? It's an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating space. Obviously, I started getting interested with youth basketball, for example, through my son who's playing basketball. And obviously, when it gets serious, you want to see maybe his opponent playing. I mean, how does it look? And maybe you want to go back to the video to watch him play again, to talk about that with him and all of that. And I started, being more interested with that. And then suddenly I was trying to find, under 15 basketball games on YouTube, and it was pretty hard to find. And I just wanted to watch that, not suddenly, it had nothing to do with my son anymore. It was just that I became, interested in that youth basketball for many reasons. It's less, the issue with the professional game is that it's so perfect that sometimes it's boring because it's too perfect.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at how difficult it was, and the difference in quality from one club to another, and the fact that 90% of that is not even produced. And again, coming back to AI, today we have obviously AI workflows with AI cameras that can pretty much do anything on their own. You put one camera, it does obviously the filming of the game. They can put graphics, do the statistics and all of that, and then stream to an endpoint, whether it's on YouTube or your own OTT platform. And I'm amazed that we're not doing more of that actually throughout the world. Obviously, there's this great example with the Super Sports School in South Africa, where they build a big business by basically covering all the youth sports there, with obviously, when you start thinking about it, I mean, obviously the business opportunities are huge. I mean, because obviously as we've mentioned, the younger demographics, they are very tough to get, through traditional marketing, through traditional advertising. They engage again very differently with sports. And other time, another good example, they showcase that you could do more reach and more impressions and more everything on social media with basically a nobody doing an incredible dunk in Wisconsin than by having the same clip from Steph Curry or Vince Carter or whatever. And that's incredible when you start thinking about it, because it's changing completely the relationship between pro sports, the value of pro sports versus the value of youth sports or amateur sports, all of that. But I think there's a huge potential in there, again, that can be enabled, because obviously, 20 years ago, you couldn't make a business case around that. Production would have been too costly. The cost of broadcasting that would have been too high as well. But these days, I could start, doing that on my own. You could acquire, there's some really cheap system these days where you can start doing this. It's just about, I guess, again, believing in that, believing in the opportunity for business model, and having also one destination for that. Because obviously, if I need to start looking in 20 different accounts, some clubs don't produce that, some leagues will produce, some don't. You need to have like an ecosystem that works, which is exactly what Super Sports School did in South Africa. And I think we're going to see more of that, because, again, everybody is looking for better value everywhere. And there's a lot of value in there potentially, and it's still, again, most of those games are not broadcasted anywhere, which to me is amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible to see that such high grade technology and footage can become common for the commoners playing games, for a fun basis, and that it's not only limited to the top games around the world, and that access to footage for review, for the coaches, the scouts, to the scout talent across the different countries, that this becomes all more accessible within our society. So I think that's very exciting. Now, changing gears a bit as well here, often enough with novel technology and new ways of thinking, new ways of structuring business models, etc., this often comes with resistance to such change. And I was curious, what are your thoughts on that within the sports media field? Do you expect a lot of resistance to such change in this sector, or do you think this will be quite a smooth transition?
Although I expect a lot of resistance. I mean, I often say that sports tend to be very conservative, but sports media even more, because we want a product. I have a good friend in the industry who always say that the issue is that the system is half broken. Many people are still living very good lives with that system, and they don't want it to change, at least until they retire. That's pretty much the attitude towards anything new. And, again, I did something that not many people are doing, was I started on the broadcast side, and then I moved to the streaming, social media, digital side, which is not that common, actually, because I can tell you that once I moved from the TV to the digital side, I felt like I was like an East German spy defecting to the West. Really, you couldn't go back then. I mean, suddenly I was a traitor to the TV people, because suddenly I was trying to do more stuff on social media and on the OTT platform and all of that. So there's still a huge wall between the two environments, which, in my opinion, is completely crazy. And you could talk about those walls pretty much everywhere within the industry. The pay TV people, they think that all my life I went through that. The pay TV people said they were competing with the free-to-air. That's really not the case. Actually, the two should be feeding each other. The traditional, the linear TV felt that it was competing with streaming. Not really, actually streaming is probably saving linear TV these days with the fast element. We're going to see a lot of resistance. And I'm seeing, in my day-to-day consulting business, I'm seeing a lot of resistance, and oftentimes it's kind of frustrating, because sometimes I want to say, you hired me to tell you, the reality of how it is, and then the solution that could help you tackle all those issues that you've been having. And the truth is what I'm telling you, Nash, you don't want to hear that. If you want to again say, yeah, because you have two different set of people. You have the people that will say, yeah, I mean, we can't do anything. It's we are lost. I mean, those young people, they won't pay for anything. They don't like sports anymore. You know, you hear that. I mean, that's crazy. Again, they are engaging more with sports than the previous generation, just in a very different way that many executives don't want to see. And then you have got the other types of people that will think, yeah, but I don't care about all your new stuff, all your new ways of doing production. What we do is working. Why would I change? Why would I change? You know, they won't change until they are next to the wall, going at 200 miles an hour, and that's the issue. But because then, what can you do? You know, you're gonna hit the wall. You need to be prepared way before that.
Huh?
And that's the most frustrating element for me within that industry. It is in many industries, to be honest with you. I mean, I wrote about the active inertia complex, which is basically when you've been successful, it's very hard to suddenly build new recipe because you want to go back to what worked for you in the past, but what worked for you in the past might not be the good recipe for today's business. And that's a huge issue for every successful company. But in the sports media industry, it's very, very, nobody wants to see that because we have very disruptive element. You know, for example, everything comes down to the value of live sports in the sports media industry. And with the younger demographic who might not be as interested in live sports as the previous generation, suddenly it put the business upside down. But does that mean that there is no value with sports? Not at all. It's just that we need to build the value chain in a very different way. But that's very challenging, and we need to be asking the hard question. And many people, unfortunately, are not really ready to look at the true issues, ask the hard question, or even less answer the hard questions.
Yeah, fair. And what would your take be on opening the minds of these people to be maybe perhaps more open to investigating change or alternative ways? Are there ways we can help these people open their minds, etc., on new approaches?
Showcasing all the positive element and the potential gains that you can have through all of that, and again, explaining also that you're not going to destroy the value that is already existing. That was the case, for example, when I moved to digital and when I started publishing, you know, for example, near live highlight clips during football games. I had people from the pay TV side coming to me and say, you're going to kill our subscription business. And I was, my answer was that, no, not only I won't be killing your subscription business anytime soon, I think I will be improving your subscription business because people need to be in contact with the product before actually acquiring the product, you know? And that's the thing. These days, it's absolutely obvious. You have no league in the world who would say, you know, we don't want any near live highlights because we want to protect the product on the pay TV side. But essentially, you know, Formula One was for a long time like that. And the reason that Liberty Media was so successful lately after they acquired Formula One was they were very progressive on the digital side. I won't even be mentioning the NBA, who was the first league to really go full on the digital side and basically choosing to work with YouTube and Facebook and all of that instead of sending lawyers to those new companies. And that was a difference maker. And I guess now we have enough, you know, we can look back to some of those initiatives and say, you see how successful that league has been? You see how successful over time that I was mentioning has been with its new media business? You know, you could be that. You could turn your old school business into that. Just the way Netflix used to be a company, you know, renting DVDs through the regular post office, you know, and that actually became an advertising tagline for them, rightfully so. Anyone can turn the business around by being bold enough to look at creative solution, including all those new tech tools that are available again, and add all those issues. You know, sports media tends to be very hardware based. We like to have racks of hardware and see that, and big control rooms and big galleries. And to me, the issue with that is that you're you have a scaling issues. It's you always have too much or not enough, because I don't know, we had times where we were suddenly acquiring more sports and we didn't have enough gear. And then suddenly we were losing sports rights and we had too much. Obviously, with cloud-based production, for example, you can scale that way more easily, but it's frightening to many people and engineers in the sports broadcasting space because they're afraid because they feel that it's not as safe as what they know, which is wrong. But if you go a bit deeper than that, they are afraid of their control over the way things are being done. And they are afraid of losing that control that they have. And in my opinion, if you want to keep control, you need to be always willing to learn new skills, new stuff. You mentioned I started as a broadcaster, now I'm helping tech companies. Obviously, it's a very different thing. I had to learn a lot of stuff along the way. That's the main motivation point for me. And I think, whenever people are asking me, what type of skills do you need to be good in this industry today? That's the first thing I mentioned. The ability to keep learning is the most essential skill in the sports media business today.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to point out, especially as we saw earlier as well, within just a short amount of time space, how much change actually is happening. That a constant evolving in a constant evolving space, that it is ever more critical to keep on learning, keep on innovating, keep on trying out new stuff as well. And I think it's interesting. This came up in the discussion before we recorded this podcast as well, that there's often resistance to step in and try something new for the first time. But once that proves to be a success, all of a sudden it turns into a fear of falling behind. And then these companies trying to hop on the bandwagon in the fear of falling behind. Now, I was always interested also to know, in the sports media industry, are there also worries and concerns regarding artificial intelligence and its potential faults, hallucinations, these kind of things? As the classic example, for instance, holds true for the publishing side of applications of AI, is that publishers, this was in The Guardian, by the way, that publishers would use artificial intelligence to help them produce new books and all this kind of stuff. And one of the publications that came out was a guide on mushrooms for people to go out in nature, check out the different types of mushrooms, know which ones are edible and know which ones aren't. But if that's completely left over to artificial intelligence with the AI generation of images and text as well, then there's a massive risk of somebody taking a mushroom that looks like the AI-generated photo. It's saying that it's edible, but it turns out that it can be. Are there risks like this as well in the sports media industry, or is this something that is less of a concern in this space?
No, obviously there are plenty of risks, like with any new technology. And again, I think many people who are looking at AI from afar, they think that it's like some kind of, artificial human being that is going to replace the actual human beings. We're not to the Blade Runner point yet. And we're not going to be needing the Turing test to see if we are actually humans or not anytime soon. And to me, AI is more like the ultimate assistant, that can allow you to be more productive and do more stuff, especially stuff where you need to compile a lot of different elements, like statistics, for example, in sports, which are, let's say you want to compare two players. It's a very complex thing to do. You could look at just basic data, but you will be missing out on many things. You could, with the help of AI, you could say, I would like to know, how this guy is doing in very specific situation, and ask the AI to look at all the footage of all the player has done, including, if we start producing more youth games, even going back to when he was 13 years old and his progression and all that. So you can process a huge amount of information and get to a better answer. But obviously, if you're just asking, ChatGPT, who's the better player between LeBron James and Michael Jordan, you won't be getting to the proper level, and you might be having, wrong stuff because it's still, it's still a very basic, artificial intelligence in a way. So yeah, to me, the true potential is within helping us deal with just an insane amount of content and data that we couldn't be processing otherwise. Obviously, we are seeing now, and we've been seeing that for a couple of years, the first try of, doing artificial intelligence commentary, for example. And people are afraid of that. The truth is that it's not very good yet. It will get better, but we're at least a few years away from that being very good. And honestly, if we are fast forwarding to a few years from now, I don't think sports commentary will be the same as it is today, because let's say we are now in a more immersive virtual environment. You don't really need the same type of commentary than when we were watching a black and white television 50 years ago. It's very different. Again, we have more tools, more statistics available. We are mostly, watching the games on top of watching our phones, and usually oftentimes, I'm watching a game plus my iPad plus my phone. I'm on 3 different apps at the same time. So you're really not listening to the commentary the way you were listening to the commentary in the 1980s, for example. So it's already, again, it's changing, and it needs to change even before we have to mention AI. So I don't think we should be fearing AI. We should be aware that all of that, it's probably gonna go through major shift in the upcoming years. Will AI be a part of that? Absolutely. But again, to me, the way AI can help us today is really important in the way we can stay relevant in terms of the content output. And I oftentimes mention the concept of the world feed, which I think is completely wrong, because in 2024, producing one feed who would feed the entire world is absolutely crazy. That cannot work, especially in sports where you don't see the entire action. It could, barely work for a football game, but even that, you would have, colors to be put here and there, because obviously you would cover more, celebration on that end rather than on that end and all that. But it's even worse with Formula One or golf, for example. And obviously, with the help of AI, you can suddenly produce multiple feeds because you can sort out multiple information in real time, or almost in real time. And I think the new frontier to me is that we used to rely on AI to produce highlight clips and then near live highlight clips. Now the next frontier is live content, 100% live through the help of AI. Sometimes you have now these days 40, 50, up to 100 different video sources at a sports event. How do you deal with that? You can have the best director and the best producers in the world. They cannot deal with that amount of cameras. I mean, again, I've worked for 10 years on golf. Golf is one of the most complex sports to produce. We're talking multiple trucks that feeds into each other, people being connected through, walkie-talkies and all that. And it's a mess to do that properly. And you're always missing stuff. You're always gonna miss something that people are gonna be mad about. Same thing with F1. They are probably one of the best leagues in producing a very compelling live feed. I mean, it's really awesome, but they keep missing stuff because they have 20 cars, 3 or 4 different onboard cameras per car, with the radio feeds and all that. They cannot listen and watch everything. It's impossible. AI can do that. AI can listen to all the radios at the same time and then make you aware that this is important. That is telling an important part of the story. And then you can rely on the human beings to do the rest. So the possibilities to me are endless. And again, it's so important because we are at a stage where we need to stay relevant. We are in danger. We have a business that is not really working these days. And we need to be able, again, to cater content to almost the individual. I mean, I think we're going to go from one feed for the entire world to almost probably in a few years, one feed per viewer. We're going to, I think at some point it will be that. And you will have, and again, that's the same thing where I think AI is important, is that we've been, I think, going as far as we could go in terms of asking people what do they want. The truth is, when you start asking people very complex stuff that are not part of their business or their usual life, what do you prefer? I mean, do you prefer seeing this or that, that stuff, that? Do you what? I mean, at some point, you're not going to get precisely the right answer. What you should be doing is learn from how they're engaging with the content. What are they doing within the app? What are they watching within the content? That's the thing. With AI, we would be able to process that more efficiently. And then suddenly build automatically something, because you will learn from what they're doing and the way they are engaging with content. That's the proper way of tailoring content to the viewer, not asking him what he prefers.
That's an interesting take with a world that is becoming so complex, and especially within the sports media landscape, with so many channels and bits and bytes of information coming in. AI can really be a powerhouse to help business leaders in this segment ahead navigate this much more efficiently, the choosing and the picking of the right pieces of data, and also with that personalize to the viewer on a much more preferable, nice platter for them individually to prefer. Now, these are very interesting takes to keep in mind as well. Sébastien, could you please, for the final question, for our business leaders listening to the podcast, what is your final advice that you'd like to pass on to them navigating this world, this complex world of AI technology? And in your case, sports, what are some final last words you'd like to pass down to them?
Well, I mean, coming back to the previous point that we raised, I think it's really important to have an open mind towards those new technology, new ways of producing content. I know that, for example, my industry and even more, the journalists, for example, they've been, has to change a lot of the way they are doing business and all that. And many people are afraid of all those new tools, and they think AI is going to replace them and all of that. It's really important to keep in mind that the world is changing. The world is evolving. The way people engage with content is evolving as well. The new generation are engaging with content in a very different way than the previous demographics. So it's not like you can stop change. You can only be ready to accompany it. To me, that's the most important, and really be, when you are in the top management of the big company, usually the hard part is that you are always engaging with today's issue. What is going on today? What do we need to solve today? What's at stake today? And sometimes we don't really have time to focus on what will be the main issues in 5-10 years, and we need to spend sometimes, that's really important to do. Everyone should be doing that, not having like a chief innovation officer in some office, usually very far away from everybody else thinking about that. It should be everybody's business to think about the future of the company. And you need to build that culture as well within a company where it's safer to come with new ideas, safer to try new technology, safer to try new things. When I had to cut cost on golf, for example, I decided to do a very weird thing that everybody, I can tell you, all the engineers at my company were looking at me like, yeah, really? You want to do that? I said, I'm going to bring back all the commentators back to Paris, because when you're doing commentary on golf, you're usually on a parking lot 2 miles from where it's happening. So it's not going to be a big change. But what I want is having like one guy on the course doing commentary with the people in Paris. And they told me, yeah, no way you're going to do that. It's not going to be properly synchronized, and the sound won't be good. It's going to cost a lot of money, the radio element that you're going to put. And in the end, I find a system that was basically, free 4G, SIM card in basically in a very small. Well, that was basically a super iPhone, and then you could send the sound back to Paris. It was obviously covering all the course, and you could have very good audio, perfectly synchronized, seamlessly, without any delay, and you could have people talking to each other 3,000 miles from each other perfectly, and it was costing almost nothing. I mean, we were talking very small investment and buying a few, renting a few SIM cards for every tournament, and that was very efficient. But I can tell you, when I came up with that solution, people were looking at me like, well, that guy is crazy. And we all need to be more open-minded for those new ideas, because you never know where you're going to have something that is really going to be a game changer. But obviously, you need to be prepared for failure as well, and that's perfectly fine. There's no safe way of trying new stuff. There's risk involved, but today's business is very risky anyway. It's no time to play it safe, in my opinion.
That's a great reminder for us all, Sébastien, especially in a world where, as the famous quote by Heraclitus goes, that nothing is permanent except change in this case. So to all our listeners out there, thank you so much, Sébastien. Thank you so much for sharing all these golden insights with our audience. And on that note, thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in on this episode. And with that said, stay curious, stay informed, and don't hesitate to take your first steps into the AI landscape. Until next time, and keep tuning in for more interesting discussions. Sébastien, thank you so much once again for sharing all of your golden nuggets of wisdom.
Thank you. Bye-bye.